So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together and welcome our guest speaker this morning, Mr. Ron Manders.
I must say, that sounds far grander than just saying battling prospector, which is probably closer to the truth. Listen, thanks very much for inviting me along here today, and I must acknowledge we're talking about the Manshell Foundation. We've sent 650 very bright young people. I'd like to acknowledge one of our brightest here, Charles Pym, over there, who we sent to an internship with the Lion Rock Institute, and then we tacked on the Austrian Economic Summit in Shanghai. But then Charles, through his own initiative, plugged it into an Institute of Economic Affairs event in Beijing, just because he was up in that area anyway. But that's stimulated your interest in China generally, and you've spent some time back there. So it's amazing how we benefit, and I benefit personally by contact with these young people, and we've got about 10 of them working for us part-time all around the place. And their instructions are to train me to think like a 30-year-old. But they say, well, don't be too ambitious, maybe 40-year-old. But it all helps to try to understand the different way of thinking, and the growing impatience with too much detail that the new generation have. There's not enough time to go into the detail that older generations used to, because they've got to keep moving. So it's very, very interesting. Now, the invitation to speak, they gave me a range of topics, and then said you can really choose what you like, which suits me. I was really going to speak on the following topic: how WA Incorporated Mark II could bring down the Barnett government. I thought that's a pretty good topic, and it's really caused by the undue influence of the Premier's Department into the land planning process in WA. In a way, it's irresponsible, and it conflicts with what we should regard as the straight-out rule of law. In one specific instance, it involves 3,000 new housing blocks being sterilised. They're 20 minutes just south of the Perth CBD. It's a serious intrusion by the Premier's Department in overriding the approvals process, and is contributing to the destabilisation of property rights. And there's 3,000 blocks, and it involves 5 of Western Australia's leading building developers, land developers, and they're becoming very impatient. And I think so somebody's going to emerge on this time. And this is at a time when young people are questioning how come we've got a shortage of land in Western Australia. There's a great demand for land, but there's a shortage which is driving the price up and exacerbating this unaffordability of land problem that is particularly with young people when they're trying to get started. It's a bizarre situation now, because we see the bureaucrats themselves becoming frustrated. They want to approve this land. But the politician, the political process is impeding this approvals. There's a whiff of crony capitalism somewhere between the Premier's Department and I think Alcoa in this case. And it may explain why the legislation that was put in the Parliament last week, which was called the taking of property rights on just terms, was not enthusiastically endorsed by the party, and it must now proceed as a private member's bill sponsored by Murray Cowper. Ask these questions why it wasn't. Perhaps it's obvious that a government can't endorse legislation which strengthens property rights when they themselves are violating the very property rights that we should be defending. Ask these questions. Please, you're very influential in the Liberal Party. Just start asking these questions, because to me, it's really got all the markings of how the Burke government were brought undone. A simple little paperback book published by Professor Paddy O'Brien brought the whole WA Incorporated to the public notice. The newspapers got onto it and the Burke government collapsed. It was very costly for all of us doing business in Western Australia. It made it harder to do business with the rest of the world for the next 10 years. So the costs of that were immense. So please get somebody to clean up their act before it gets out of hand. So, but looking out the window and looking at this wonderful setting we have here, I decided not to talk on that at all because it's too damn depressing. And it reminded me of a fellow called Harry Brown, who was a great investment guru, and he said to me once, back about the early 80s, he said, "Ron, people keep asking me the question, which is the best country in the world?" He said, "It's a crazy question. There's three questions they should be asking. What's the best country in the world in which to work? What's the best country in the world in which to invest? And what's the best country in the world in which to live?" He said they are three entirely separate questions and you get a different answer for each of those three questions. He was right, and in many ways Australia is not the best country in which to work at the moment and not the best country in which to invest, but it sure as hell is the best country in which to live. And I get reminded of this every time I jump on my bike and ride around the Swan River in the mornings. I say, this is just superb. Now, to find out how we rank as far as working and investing, I'd invite you to come along to a man-cow function we're running at the Celtic Club on October the 30th, where we're bringing Fred McMahon from the Fraser Institute from Canada, and he's going to reveal this year's analysis of how the various countries rate with respect to working and investing, and it's called the World Economic Freedom Index. Very interesting to see how the countries rank, and he'll explain their criteria and how they do the judging. But that's a great event. That's October 30th. Look at our website, which is www.mancal.org. All the details are there. But I think I'll concentrate this morning on the joys of saying yes. And I mean saying yes for ourselves. Yes to the way we spend our money, not yes to the way government spends our money. I'm a little bit cynical about the way government spends our money, but often says yes. For instance, successive US presidents often ring the Prime Minister of Australia, whoever they happen to be at the time, and suggest we go help them drop some bombs on countries we may not have heard of and that we're certainly not at war with. What's Canberra say? Okay. We've done that several times, and more recently there was a request that Australia should spend $100 million fighting somebody else's plane. So what did they say in Canberra? Okay. So I'm against this indiscriminate spending of our money because I would rather see it left with us to make our own decisions. I've said so many yes so many times it's got me into so much trouble. I wrote a book about it called Heroic Misadventures. But so for what I'll speak about today, it's more from the heart than from the mind. It's a non-technical thing because it reminded me how I was earlier this year sitting at my computer, just harmlessly sitting at my computer, and I got inundated with invitations to go to different things. Sometimes I look at them and say, fantastic, and I just write them down and I put them on a wish list of fantasy land. Wouldn't it be good? But 5 invitations came within I think almost within the one day, and I suddenly lined them up and I said, by God, I could do all those 5 things with one easy overseas trip. All the dates lined up, so what did I do? I said, yes. And away I went, and that made for a most interesting June 2014 for me. So if I can can bear with you, I'll just take you by the hand and so you can enjoy these 5 particular adventures. One was attending a little intimate dinner in Hong Kong at the Lion Rock Institute, where they had Professor David Friedman, who's the son of Milton Friedman, and a very incisive, he's really a development further than his father, and he wrote a book some years ago called The Machinery of Freedom, and he is now working on a revised edition, and he led us in a wonderful little dinner with about 20 of us. He led us through the thought process he's got about strengthening up his book, which is sort of full of definitions of what governments should be doing, and if they stuck to what they should be doing, they would gain our respect, and we'd sort of they'd earn back this respect for authority that we once had. That was a wonderful event. The second thing was to attend the wedding of 2 amazing young people in Ukraine. And I was also invited to write a poem for the wedding and present it. There's another story, but I'll tell you more about that later. The third thing was to interview 4 of the young, very courageous young people in Ukraine who got that Maidan Square revolution going. The fifth thing was to participate in the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square revolution. That event was being held in Hong Kong because it wasn't allowed to be held in Beijing. And they expected 1,500 people to attend, and 200,000 people turned up. And there I was with my trusty little video camera and a very competent Chinese interpreter to guide me through exactly what was happening. So there are many memorable moments from that little quick trip around that covered those incidences. So but I think the main impression was those fantastic young people in Ukraine and the Chinese people that had come to Hong Kong for that event. The way they virtually sparkled with anticipation of gaining at some stage the freedoms that all of us are simply born with and we take for granted. I'll never forget the impression they made on my mind. So, and that's coming back to me. Sorry if I'm a bit emotional, but I've been doing all the editing on all these videos and I can see the hope in their eyes. They won't forget in Ukraine having their friends, 25-year-old friends, shot and killed by their government. We're lucky. We can buck the bureaucracy in Australia. And what's our penalty? We might get a threatening letter from some third-grade bureaucrat, or we might get a fine of $200. And it's a fun thing, and I love it. You know, it's enjoyment. But when they buck a bureaucracy, they either get shot or see their friends getting shot. There's a lot of work to do in the world to pick up the world's game there. But there was a theme that emerged from all those events. The second event was doing this interview with Linda Whetstone in London, and that gave me an opportunity also when I was in London to spend some time with my daughter and her family. But Linda Whetstone is the daughter of Sir Anthony Fisher, who started the world's first economic think tank, which Charles attended. And he was so impressed with the success of that he formed the Atlas Economic Research Foundation, and they've Fisher's comment was that he wanted to litter the world with free market think tanks as an antidote to communism, which was threatening the world. There are now 485 of these free market think tanks around the world, all directly attributed to the philanthropy and the thinking and the planning of Fisher, and Linda Whetstone, his daughter, is continuing this work. Very inspirational. All these videos that I've taken are up on our Mancal 97 YouTube collection. I won't go into details, but they're all there. If anyone's got the patience to look at these things, give me a call. I'll give you the URLs. But and then I think I promised just to mention something about the wedding in Ukraine, which was interesting. I think everything the Ukrainians do just is a little bit different, but I'll just mention a couple of things. The hens party, to which I was not invited, consisted of the girls jumping off a 10-storey office building with bungee straps around their waist. So that makes for an interesting hens party. The bucks party, to which I was invited, I think I caught the wrong train from the wrong place, but anyway, maybe it's best that I didn't get there, because that was consisted of climbing the highest mountain in the Ukraine, which just happens to be twice as high as anything in West Australia, like Mount Bruce, just twice as high, and exactly 7 times higher than anything I've ever climbed, which is Peak Charles, just east of Norseman. Climbing this mountain in kilts. That was my question. How come? Well, apparently they tell me that the Braveheart movie was filmed on the top of this highest mountain, and so hence the connection with kilt. But they kept the kilt for me, which they presented to me after I climbed with them the highest site in Kiev, in Lviv, which is the clock tower thing. We climbed the thing for the kilt presentation. So I've returned to Australia with my very first kilt, which I think I probably should ride around the Swan River on some sunny day for the next charity fundraising event. But the challenge also was to write some poems suitable for a wedding at which no one spoke English other than myself and the bride and some of her younger friends. So I wrote not one poem but 4. But my secretary, when she was typing them over, said no. She said that particular one is totally unsuitable to be read at a young girl's wedding. So we scrapped it, and I performed 3. It was a bit of a challenge. The interpretation wasn't that easy, and the translation, but we got away with it. But if I can indulge you, I'll give you the 3rd one, which was just in the form of a toast to the new generation. Yeah, can you stand a poem? Yeah. Each of you have been busy these past years preparing for life, casting aside any fears. Julia I saw in 2010 giving a speech that showed the many seeds she had gathered, seeking fertile fields to be sowed. Each time since she has grown, resembling a young Margaret Thatcher, to serve her beloved Ukraine before some man could catch her. Studying, reading, preparing, absorbing wisdom both old and some new, she was fully prepared and knew just what to do. Now to Roman we turn, an ideal balance to this team, acquiring education and skills, blending together it would seem. An interesting education ranging from economics in Barcelona, charity work, restaurants and healthcare, all essential parts of Roman's persona. Roman always gets it right, but by his actions today breaks many Ukrainian hearts in an unintentional way. So for all of us here tonight, we rely on your generation to create a better world, and particularly for your Ukraine nation. Roman is loved by Julia and all her family, in particular by Sofika, her 7-year-old sister. Sofika has proudly announced that she aims to grow up fast so that she can marry Roman. This introduced an element of urgency. That's why Julia decided to speed things up and cut out all the competition. So now, Sofika, please bring me a drink. So before we dance, let's all drink a toast to Julia and romance. Fine romance. That bride, who is a young economist with the Kiev School of Economics, was one of the small group of young people who started that Maidan revolution. And an email to me on the 22nd of November, she simply said, "Something's happening in Ukraine." Did any of you sort of watch all that stuff happening on the TV? Is what happening? They didn't know it was going to go for over 3 months. They didn't know that 100 of their mates would be shot. Anyway, they pulled it off, and it resulted in the crooked president fleeing the country. So since then I've been an observer, a very interested observer in the outcome of that revolution. The tour of Maidan, and a whole bunch of young people took me, spent a whole day and a whole night touring around there. There's still 1,000 people, I reckon 1,000 people living on Maidan Square 7 months after the revolution, living in tents and shacks, and they're all determined not that their memory of their 100 mates won't be forgotten. It's a huge task. It's in the town square, the centre of town, blocking the traffic. Very hard to do business in the centre of the town. Some of the major buildings are all burnt out. The buildings were occupied by these young people, providing medical supplies, blood supplies and all sorts of things to the people who were being injured. That was burnt out by the government to burn out the people that were sort of providing supplies and soup and stuff to their own people. So I think it's a difficult task, and I spoke to the guy who's the assistant to the mayor in Kiev, and they've got the task of somehow erecting a monument to all this, as they've done in New York to the 9/11 event, but somehow erecting that monument to point out that this is of great significance and will be remembered, but at the same time being able to extract all this. The paving blocks were all stacked up as barriers against the police brutality, so we've got to replace all the paving to the streets, and there must be 1 million tyres all stacked up still as monuments, but that's all on my video. Now, I've had an interest in revolutions and revolts for some time. I think probably anyone coming from Calgary is ready for the next revolution in some way, but I got interested when I was in East Germany just before the fall of the wall, and then when I was in a team of 40 people that were sent to Russia, Moscow and Leningrad, just as the communism was collapsing and as they were pulling down statues, and so I followed this, and then I had to give the keynote speech in Ballarat in 2004 for the 150th anniversary of the Eureka Stockade, which is our only revolution that we've had here. I was invited because my great-grandfather was one of the prospectors involved in that event. And more recently, in 2011, I filmed a whole lot of young people from the various Arab Spring countries, the revolutions. In Istanbul, I got a little interview, and I did this video of all the reason for the revolutions and how they've not turned out well. And all those people that I interviewed are no longer allowed to live in the various countries where they were stimulating those revolutions. So, so the theme for today really, what is the outcome of these revolutions? Is it a good outcome generally, or what's the track record of revolutions? And maybe we could ask whether Australia needs a revolution, or in fact I think it needs more of a devolution. Now, what the hell is a devolution? It's really the transfer of power to lower levels especially by central government to local government and local government back to ourselves. In a way, it's another word for individual responsibility, doing for ourselves on a much more economical and efficient basis, and a much more caring basis than it can be done by people from a great distance at great expense. Now, I know there are certain elements in the community that do need help, but the genuine cases don't represent a huge burden on society. But when there's incentives to recruit people to be part of this welfare thing, it's amazing how many people you can recruit. So there's a huge burden being carried that doesn't really need to be carried. So when we start doing things for ourselves, we are able to judge what things we should be doing. So we've got, I think devolution is an antidote for this, this entitlement sickness that we've got in Australia. And I think the word entitlement sickness was raised by Joe Hockey, the Federal Treasurer, and he's saying the age of entitlement is finished in Australia. But it's confusing to people such as myself, where at the same time our Prime Minister announced that the age of entitlement is about to commence with the paid parental leave sort of thing. You know, I'm probably the older generation who wanted to have children. You took it with pride. You paid for your own children. You cared for your own children. There was a sort of there was a thing. This is what you did. You were a parent, you know, instead of offloading it to somebody else. Anyway, I just raised those things. So a lot of people are studying the outcome of these revolutions because, God damn it, we've had a whole series of revolutions around the world. It was almost like about the 1850s, when the whole world was in turmoil. All those Baltic nations belting each other up. India was in flame, east to west, and Australia benefited from that because people came from many of those countries to settle in Australia to get away from all that. So, but I don't think there's been more revolutions since the 1850s, and so people are looking at those things. Gary North is one guy. He sends us stuff every week. He feels that revolutions are counterproductive because they all result in further centralisation of power, not the devolution of power. He says, this is his words, the essence of revolution is centralised power. Engels knew this early and reminded of us for years. There is nothing more centralising than a revolution. Every revolution in history has moved toward the centralisation of power, even including the American Revolution. He highlights the point that emerged from all, and that same thing emerged from all these interviews I had with people. The thing that is obvious to us now that wasn't in 1850, that the revolutions now are being made possible by Facebook and the social media and the ability to communicate and bypass all the official channels of news. People are not getting their news here from the ABC anymore. They're getting it from the same sources as the ABC News is getting. They're getting it from the raw data, not the interpretation that's being fed to us by whoever wants to interpret it for us. That's only the beginning. I guess what happens next in these countries, many of them are left operating in an absolute vacuum. They know what they wanted to get rid of, and they've got rid of it, but they haven't developed a crystal clear vision of what should replace what's gone. Again, the open line technology is enabling people to pick and compile visions of limited government, of the ability to regain that individual responsibility. They don't have to wait for Big Brother to give them a vision of where they should be going. So there is hope there. We're seeing today what's the equivalent of the breakup of the Roman Empire in many ways. It's what happened with communism. Communism, there wasn't a revolution that knocked over communism, it just collapsed because it didn't work. And we're seeing this again with all these despotic nations. People are refusing to fund them. Nobody pays company tax in Ukraine. None of the companies, they're all registered somewhere else, all run by Ukrainians. They said, why would you pay company tax? You see what the government's doing with the money. You know?
That is one view we can't get away with in Australia. I've tried.
Well, I tried. I had to leave the country for 7 years. That's one of the chapters in my book. But even in England, you go back in the 17th century, there were attempts for revolutions. The Puritans and it was a revolt against the centralised power of the king, but it was done in the name of the centralised power of the Parliament. It was then taken over by military dictator Oliver Cromwell. He was replaced by a new king. But every time these replacements of power is centralised and it goes back to Parliament instead of this devolution. With massive decentralisation, there comes a form of succession in a way, and I don't mean the sort of succession that we talk about when we want to secede from Canberra. That would have resulted in a whole bunch of despots in Perth running things. And in a way, it may have been fortunate that the people of Kalgoorlie voted against secession back in 1933. But revolutions mean centralisation of power. That's the key to it. And until conservative organisations such as your Liberal Party figure this out, I don't think they will really benefit the nation. Revolution, centralised power, and just changing the faces up front doesn't change anything else. And this was repeatedly told to me in Ukraine that they had an orange revolution in 2004 that changed the faces, but the corrupt bureaucracy continues. And they don't know what to do. One of the guys in the newly formed parliament, and this election's continuing on between now and the end of the year, he said, in my department, I've got 3,200 bureaucrats. I don't know what they do, and I don't know how to get rid of them. It's a challenge, but isn't it reminiscent of us here? When a new incoming government comes in, you come in with all these great ideas, but you're stuck with what? They're unsackable. So we don't need a revolution, but we need this devolution. Think of that word. Changing the faces don't work. And again, each political party seems to think the secret of better education is for them to capture the existing public school system. Each political party feels they've got a better plan for that public system. The secret of better education is to go online, cut the cost of education, decentralise the whole process, and put parents in control of their families' educational programs. Neither Liberal or Labor seem to understand that they just want to capture the established system because they've got a better plan to make it work. The Bolsheviks did that with the Tsar's bureaucracy, and again the French Revolution has never worked. So it just simply means a withdrawal of support and influence. Use your influence with your Liberal Party. We don't want to take up arms against our government. We simply need to refuse to cooperate with a state or make it more expensive for the government to enforce their will on ours. It'll be easier to facilitate the more that respect is lost for government in its existing form, and every day in every media you see another scandal emerge, another waste of money. This all undercuts the respect that we once used to have for our elected representatives. So My thoughts just explain my general lack of enthusiasm and interest in the current form of elections, which are focused on capturing the existing hierarchical systems of power. There's nothing's going to change. So I say to you today, please use your influence with your party. Don't bring on a revolution, but bring on a devolution. And this way we might ensure a peaceful and prosperous nation where, as well as being the greatest place in the world to live, we will again be the greatest place in the world in which to work and in which to invest. So thank you for coming on that journey with me today.
Would anyone like to ask Ron a quick question? No? Okay.
I have a quick question. If there's one single gift that we as West Australians could send to the people of Ukraine, let me tell you what it is. It's our Strata Title Act, which was, Jenny knows more about this than right, about 1962 or something. We didn't have a Strata Title Act in West Australia until then. It works so well. Ukraine hasn't recovered from coming out of communism 40 years ago. Might be 40 years ago, 30 years ago, where the announcement was made, well, communism's finished, you can all own your own apartments. And I saw their apartments, they can. They purchased their own apartments, and in their apartments, they're very modern, very new, but that stops at the door. There's no such thing as a corporate body. There's no such thing as coordinating services. I was staying in one of these. On the last day, I wanted to put out the plastic bag of rubbish. I went down, so where are the bins? Nobody spoke English, and somebody pointed. Walked down the street to the next street, and then 2 blocks up, and on the corner there's a government dumper. But there's, you know, we're spoiled. I mean, you're living in the strata title thing. Somebody magically comes and puts all the bins out on Thursday. Somebody magically washes all the bins, puts them back on Friday. All this sort of stuff happens. None of that happens. What about the communal properties where the people walking up the steps into the building, they're all damaged, falling apart? And I said to somebody, what's the arrangement? There's 80 apartments in this block. I said, what's the arrangements for fixing all this? Oh, you've got to put a proposal into the mayor of Kiev. There's only 4 million people in Kiev. So nothing happens. So, hey, aren't we lucky having a bloody strata title act?
Thank you, Ron.